Vanakkam, good evening and good morning, everyone. Please switch off your mic because of the meeting. The conference will be started very soon. So please switch off everyone. Then only we can organize this conference very peacefully and we can listen everyone's speech very clearly. I am Dr.VRS.Sampath, President of the Madras Development Society, the registered NGO in 1981, conducting conference, seminar, workshop time to time on various subjects. In Chennai, other part of the world like Dubai, Kuala Lumpur, Sydney, South Africa, Durban, London, New York, and many other places. Apart from that, I'm editor of the Sattkadir Tamil Law Journal, published from 1992. This journal, translating all the judgment from English to Tamil and circulating in Tamil Nadu and other part of the world. Today, we all assembled to participate UN 75th year and beyond virtual conference. This conference is very essential at this time. UN started in 1945. We celebrated 50th anniversary and conference in Chennai 1995. Please switch off your mic.
No, laptop na HP.
Please switch off. Don't
HP laptop.
Switch off your mic. Who's speaking? So 1995 we organized a conference on the same subject and we invited the Bharat Ratna C. Subramaniam, the former governor and former defense minister of India, to be a chief guest. And today's chair, Dr. Anandakrishnan, was chaired in 1995 in Chennai in Taj Government Hotel. That's why we requested him to participate today also to chair the same session. I am very happy to welcome Dr. M. Anandakrishnan, former director of United Nations, former vice chancellor of Anna University, and many more universities as a chairman and many other positions. And also I am welcoming His Excellency Mr. T.S. Tirumurthy, permanent representative of India to United Nations, New York. He is from Chennai. He is now in New York. The Chennai man is sitting in New York. Another important VIP, Ambassador Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, is a very popular person in the diplomatic world and also the conference world. Any conference on any important subject, people will invite him to give a speech because he knows the world, he knows the India very well. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. T.P. Srinivasan and the great lady, Madam Hila Gandhi, is a former member of parliament and also is a leading social worker, public activist, and a close friend of Nelson Mandela. And she fought for long years along with Nelson Mandela to get a freedom in South Africa. She's here. She's a granddaughter of our great Mahatma Gandhi. I'm welcoming Madam to participate in our meeting. Another important guest, Mr. Arumugam Parasuraman, is a former director and former minister of education. He is a very regular visitor to Chennai. Last year, even we honored him to get an honorary doctorate from Tamil University, Tanjavur. He is a very strong man to connect everyday India because he is expecting any moment will join our meeting. Next is the great friend, Mr. Virendra Sharma. Mr. Virendra Sharma is a senior most politician, parliament member of UK, and also is a very good speaker, and he participated in our conference in 2016, Third World Tamil Economic Conference. I'm welcoming Mr. Virendra Sharma. Next, I am happy to welcome Mr. Dr. McDermott. He is not participating. He sent in his wishes to, because of time change, he's having some meeting because it's Australia, you know, now it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So that's why he's hesitating to participate in this meeting. Another important guest, Dr. V. Jabamali. Jabamali means Sirido. He lived in Vienna more than 30 to 40 years. He knows in and out of Sirido. He is regularly participating in seminars, conferences all over the world. He's a retired now, full-fledged person to portray or criticize United Nations because he's outside now. I'm welcoming Mr. Jabamali, Dr. Jabamali, for this because we wrongly printed formal principal director. He's not a principal director, he's a principal advisor to Director General. Another important guest, Mr. A.S. Panneerselvam. You know very well, Hindu is a popular, oldest national daily, English daily in India. He is now, he will join any moment. He is holding a reader's editor position there, and he will give a wonderful speech. Another important guest from Middle East, Mr. Ahmad Al-Makani, public policy analyst. We got his name and his connection only 2 days back through our good friend Chitra Narayan and Lakshmi. Both ladies very strongly working with us for various functions. So I told one person should speak about Middle East. You have to find out the right person. They arranged I spoke to him also. He's a wonderful gentleman in public life. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Mukani in this conference. Vanakkam. And also today's meeting, our economic professor, retired professor, Mr. Dr. T.K.S. Villalan will give a vote of thanks. I'm welcoming Ms. Anu Narendran, the young and talented lawyer, to introduce every guest properly. I told Anu to find out every participant's and speaker's profile through Google and put nutshell and short and give introduction to the participants. It will be very good to know everyone, their background. I am one and all welcoming everyone. Today, we all assembled to discuss about, to listen the speeches of United Nations about the 75th year activities like a stock exchange, stock taking report, or what is the achievement, what is the problems, what is the progressive, many other things we can get from the speakers. Because United Nations is an intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and be a center for harmonizing the action of nations. It is the largest, most familiar, most internationally represented, and the most powerful international organization in the world. The UN is headquartered in the international territory in New York City, with its other main offices in Geneva, Nairobi, Vienna, and The Hague. The UN was established after World War II with the aim of preventing future wars, succeeding the ineffective League of Nations. On 25th of 1945, 50 governments met in San Francisco for a conference and started drafting the UN Charter. On 24th of October 1945, when UN began operation pursuant to the Charter, the organization objectives include maintaining international peace and security, protecting human rights, delivering humanitarian aid, promoting sustainable development, and uphold international law. At this funding, the UN had a 51 at the founding. The UN had a 51 member states. With the addition of South Sudan in 2011, membership is now 193, representing almost all of the world sovereign states. This is UN background. You know, First World War, Second World War, please switch off mic. Both are, now we are facing the real Third World War through COVID-19 all over the world. Please switch off the mic. switch off everyone. So this is the COVID-19. We are facing unlimited problem. We are unable to meet each other. We are unable to talk to each other. We are unable to travel. We are unable to run anything. Not one country, 193 countries facing problems and problems for the past 1 year. This is a real war. How we can go? What is the UN contribution? What is the world government contribution? What is the every country is doing? What is the scientific organization? What is the medical activities going on? We are very much worried. This time we are assembled here to discuss many other things. Mainly we are expecting from the speakers the role of your economic and social development, the impact of peacekeeping, the role and importance of Security Council, the importance of membership for India's Security Council, United Nations role on the health development, especially COVID management, United Nations role in safeguarding the world from environment, United Nations role on conflict resolution. You know very well, wars are going on Syria, Afghanistan, Sudan, India, Pakistan, India, China, Sri Lanka, Tamil issues still not settled. Many issues going on all over the world. United Nations Industrial Development Organization, United Nations role in bridging the gap between developing and developed countries, United Nations power and big power, how they doing together. So many topics are there to discuss, but I'm expecting all top speakers can give some points. We cannot discuss for 5 to 10 hours, at least 1 or 2 hours, because it's a conference. You can take 10 to 15 minutes each speaker and give your speech very well, because all are very senior persons in public and social and governmental activities. You know about situation, how to present your speech. I'm welcoming one and all for this wonderful conference, because we have a history to organize previous conference, this conference. I'm very happy to all participants, all speakers, one and all. I am requesting Anu introduce our chairman to our participants. Anu.
A very good evening to one and all present here. I am Anu Narendran, an advocate from Madras High Court, and today I would be giving an introductory note about every speaker in the conference. Dr. M. Anandakrishnan, former director of the United Nations and former vice chancellor of Anna University. He is an Indian civil engineer, educationist, former chairman of the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and vice chancellor of Anna University. Sir was a winner of the National Order of Scientific Merit Award from Brazil. In 2002, Sir was also honored with the Padma Shri Award by the Government of India. Sir was an elected fellow of the National Academy of Science, India, and Institute of Engineers, India. Sir, it is a privilege to have you here. Thank you.
I want to tell you one more point before starting. He served in the United Nations long period. It's a very important.
Yes.
One of the important points, United Nations Secretary of the 51 nations, India, one of the country secretary, the 2 Tamils signature inside United Nations charter. I'm welcoming Mr. Dr. Anandakrishnan to present his speech.
Thank you. You want me to speak?
Yes, sir. You can speak.
Thank you, Dr. Sampath, for this opportunity. I want to compliment you for having taken the initiative to organize this event with such eminent and distinguished speakers who are here. Now, having served the United Nations Center for Science and Technology for Development for 12 years, from 1978 to 1990, I consider this an opportunity to reflect on the role of the United Nations. I would like to, you have given a good introduction. I would like to quickly outline the positive achievements of the United Nations. It was founded after the wreckage of the World War, and the founders recognized the importance of 3 pillars: peace and security, development, and human rights. And the diplomacy as well as development of arms control prevented a major third world war. Now, this was a Declaration of the Human Rights was made in 1948. Millennium Development Goal, that's simply established in 2000, is one of the important milestones in the achievement of the United Nations to combat poverty, hunger, disaster, illiteracy, environment degradation, and decriminalization against women, discrimination against women. Now, the four important ideals of the United Nations are: one is peace, two is justice, third is equality, and fourth is dignity. And the Third World War has been avoided. Among its other achievements are eradication of diseases, some of the diseases at least, reduction of hunger, development of international law, and agreements to protect the environment. Now, the Paris Agreement in climate change is one of its landmark achievements of the United Nations. Now, there are others, still, in spite of all that, there are still some persisting problems. Now, these are: gender inequality remains the greatest single challenge to human rights around the world. Climate calamity still looms. Biodiversity is collapsing. Poverty is rising. Hatred is spreading. And nuclear weapons remain still a problem. So, the UN works through its 15 specialized agencies, which among this I consider the important one. 5 important are FAO, UNESCO, UNIDO, WHO, and the World Bank. Now, when I was in the United Nations in New York, I had an opportunity to interact with almost all of them. And the Center for Science and Technology, I had the development of responsibility to promote science and technology in developing countries. Fortunately, I had access to substantial amount of funds, but it was in the form of rubles. The Russians, former Soviet Union, paid about 25% of their dues to UN in hard currency, the balance in rubles. So these rubles can be spent only in countries where rubles are accepted, such as East European countries and some countries in Africa who had special relationship with the Soviet Union. Now, I could use these rubles to buy flight tickets in Euroflot wherever the Euroflot is flying. So I managed to organize a large number of projects in developing countries where rubles were accepted. And I also held several important meetings in Eastern European countries and some developing countries where Aeroflot flew. And the participants were also given per diem in rubles, which they can spend in those countries. It was a unique opportunity for me to visit a large number of countries in Eastern Europe, Africa, Latin America, and Asia. So having said all this, there are certain limitations in the United Nations. Now, there are still civil wars going on in Bosnia, Somalia, Rwanda, and Yemen, and there is a nuclear war with crisis in North Korea. In the second Security Council, unanimous vote of the 5 permanent representatives is required to settle international problems. And as you all know, very rarely they can come to an agreement, and the veto often causes a deadlock. And despite the fact the UN achievement, there are some important weaknesses such as transnational terrorism and illicit arms race, and anachronistic composition of the Security Council, and absence of mechanism to empower the judgment of the International Court of Justice. So these are some of my initial observations, and I'm looking forward to the views and presentations from many of our distinguished other speakers. Thank you, Dr. Sampath.
Thank you, Doctor. You given a wonderful speech about including all the issues at present. I am very happy to call Anu to introduce Mr. Ahmad Al-Khani. Okay. Mr. Ahmad?
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Ahmad Al-Muhani, Public Policy Analyst, Oman, is a researcher and analyst of public policy and governance. He was an advisor officer of the Executive President, Capital Market Authority at the Sultanate of Oman. Earlier, he has also chaired the SASLO Legal Training Center. Sir is also an alumnus of the Durham University and the University of Glamorgan. Sir has also served as a member-elected chamber of Bicameral Council of Oman between 1999 to 2008. Sir, it is an honor to have you with us today.
Sir, Mr. Ahmad Al-Mukhani, please switch on your mic and present your speech, sir.
Thank you very much. Is my voice clear to you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to thank you for the opportunity, for the occasion, and to actually include me in the this conference among such an august group of people. And I would like perhaps also to start by saying that I speak here in my personal capacity. So my views do not represent the Omani government nor my employer. It strictly reflects my own views and experience as I've dealt with the United Nations. When Lakshmi actually called me and she offered me this onerous experience to actually speak with you about the UN celebrating the 75th anniversary, the first thing that came to mind was my work with the human rights instruments that were established by the UN. Particularly, I worked closely with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and its implementation in Oman, and also various reports about the Middle East to do with gender-based violence, etc. But then I also realized that in order for the UN to have been able to actually mainstream human rights instruments, it should have been actually, it should have had been accepted as a source of international legitimacy, as well as being a reflection of the world order. So I thought in my brief introduction today that I will touch upon the UN from my perspective in three brief points. My first point, the UN as a source of international legitimacy. My experience, having worked for the government, the Omani government, and being a senior policy advisor in the elected chamber, that the UN has served as a platform for consensus building at the international level, combining the collective good or ethics espoused by the concept of a world society, and also the reciprocal duties of law and order espoused by the society of states. So it's combining the concept of world state and the concept of internationalization. And I realized that Oman, since its beginning in the modern Renaissance, since 1970, has relied heavily on the UN as a source of international positioning, and relied significantly on its resolution, its instruments and bodies to a great extent. That was complemented by the Omani character that gave rise to two fundamental principles of the Omani foreign policy, and that is non-interference in internal affairs and mutual respect. And I'm very happy to say that throughout the 6,000, at least 6,000 years of history between Oman and India, and the over 50 years of diplomatic relationships between Oman and India, we did not have a single diplomatic incident. It was really, or has been, a relationship that has been built on mutual respect between two great nations that complement each other in their journey for development. Because of that, Oman found it useful to rely on the UN as a benchmark and a guidance for human rights. I could not overemphasize the role of the committees that are associated with the various UN human rights treaties in ensuring countries' compliance. Sorry, in ensuring countries' compliance and following the great principles of human rights. And what we have actually benefited a lot from is the various consultations that we have been able to acquire from the various UN bodies and their documentation, and learning from other countries' experiences, like, for example, India and the neighborhoods also here, in how we mainstream human rights, particularly the social dimension of it, with the, with the gender in our policy setting and in the law enforcement. But perhaps for me, there are two more very significant incidences where the UN has proven to be very useful. The first one, in terms of human rights, the first one is after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a huge vacuum. This huge vacuum was only going to be filled by the international or the global civil society network that could have also been held only by the UN and its international treaties and human rights treaties. And the other thing, the other instance where I thought that the UN has really had momentous achievement is the Universal Periodic Review. 50 years ago, nobody would have actually fathomed or believed that states would willingly actually open their doors, open their books, and talk about their human rights behavior and practices in front of everybody, allowing duty bearers and rights holders to come together as among everybody and share their experiences, hoping to reach to a very fair middle point. With that, I would like to actually say that there is still a room for the UN and its bodies, as well as countries, to enshrine human rights along the very large spectrum of universalism and relativism. With that, I would like perhaps to come to my third point, which is, in my opinion, is a very important point. And that is, the United Nations must reflect the new world order. The long-awaited reforms must come to fruition now. New realities on the ground are not really reflected in the United Nations Security Council. Out of the emerging 7 economies, including China, India, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, Indonesia, and Turkey, only China and Russia are represented as permanent members at the United Nations Security Council. I think with India being a rising giant economically and the largest democracy in the world, it must be required that India be a member of the United Nations Security Council, along with Turkey, because also Turkey represents historic powerhouse that needs to be recognized, in the United Nations. So both India and Turkey, backed by history, economy, and military arsenal, I think have the right opportunity, and it's time for the United Nations to reflect this new reality. I think with that, I would like to end my intervention, thanking you for your patience and for this opportunity to share my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Mukani. You've given a wonderful speech, and also you are supporting the India's membership, United Nations Security Council membership. That is a long pending issue. I'm very happy. Thank you once again for your proposal. And also you suggested one more country, Turkey. That is also we can consider. Many other countries on the way, they can consider and take a decision. Even they can make it to the 5, they can make it even 10. There is no issue at all. Because a bigger administration, bigger council, always good to run the United Nations more usefully and more fruitfully. I am requesting Mr. A.S. Paneerselvam. Before that, Anu to introduce Mr. Paneerselvam to the audience.
Yes, sir. Mr. A.S. Paneerselvam, Reader's Editor, The Hindu, Chennai. Sir was a committee member of the Global Forum Media Development, advisory panel member, Global Forum Media Development. Sir was the managing editor of Sun Networks Indian Television before. Before joining the Sun Networks, Sir was a chief of bureau for Outlook, a magazine which is an English language weekly. Sir has published more than 200 articles, and Sir also holds a master's in psychology. Sir was a Reuters Fellow at the University of Oxford. Sir, we're very honored to have you here. I please request you to come forward for your speech.
Hello, you unmute your mic, Mr. Paneerselvam. Okay, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. My experience as a journalist with the United Nations goes back as a reporter going with the Prime Minister during the Prime Minister's customary UNGA addressing. It started with Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. And if we look at the Government of India policy documents from the days of the Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao to the days of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we find that demands remain the same. And we see that little progress has really happened at the ground level. Therefore, if you do a dispassionate compilation of what Government of India has been saying, because when Prime Minister Narasimha Rao made his first set of recommendations, it was the first meeting by the Prime Minister of India after the collapse of Soviet Union, after the end of Cold War, and we thought that the beginning of a new world order, and with India opening up, and we would see some sort of a rapid growth. But unfortunately, in one area where we don't see any rapid growth, but a systematic stalling is in this multilateral forum. And we don't know the specific areas, but what is very, very clear is that the very structural arrangement of being a privileged club and not permitting others to becoming the member of this new club, is a entrenched issue about which very little can be done. The thing is, the members of the P5, whatever be their ideological position, are not willing to give up their privilege or to extend the same privilege to the new members. If we look at the question of India's membership, that one area which keeps coming up is, do India has a right to have veto like the other five? And generally, once the question of the veto comes in, we also find the way some of the countries are expressing their reservation. So the idea of the international body being a privileged club where the early entrants have their entrance positions and the late entrants have been kept at bay, this situation hasn't been subjected to a serious change for the last 30 years at least. There is one element is that the texts are always progressive. If you look at the text for the reforms, almost all the texts are extremely progressive and inclusive, but none of these texts have been implemented. Therefore, there is this gap between the pronounced statements and what we actually do. What can we do to see that our action actually matches the statements? That is the key issue. Whether it is a universal declaration of human rights or the other principles which have been enshrined in the chapter, what we see is a big gap between the stated principles and the way it is getting implemented. Unless and otherwise we recognize that there is a gap between the stated principles and the way the stated principles are being implemented, I don't think we are going to make progress. And for this, we need a dispassionate evaluation of the places where there's a gap between the stated position and the implementation aspect. Professor Ananthakrishnan spoke about the gap between International Court of Justice's directives not being implemented. That is one area where I think we have to be very, very clear that the implementation process are so weak, and there is a very particular twist which keeps coming in. At what moment it becomes an interference, and at what moment it is a legitimate pressure to do the right thing. Unless and otherwise we are able to make this distinction, that is, what is the right intervention? Because this complete non-intervention and multilateralism doesn't go hand in hand. Multilateralism at some level is a higher principle called interdependence. And in interdependence, you actually take and give. Therefore, the moment we agree that it's a multilateralism and there is an element of take and give, where are we going to stop using this word of interference? That is the key question, and for which, unfortunately, most of the foreign policy experts, at least in South Asia, have come up with a real balance. There seems to be an ultra-nationalistic reading when there is a critical observation about India. And we do want a critical observation about the people with whom we are not comfortable with. But this question of what is a legitimate intervention, what is intervention, and what is overbearing or what is overreach, these are the issues which has to be first internally settled, and based on those issues, we have to take the issue up. And I think we can talk about it in the next round of the discussion, but these are the issues which I want to flag, because as a journalist, from the days of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, what we are witnessing is that we are coming up with a series of ideas which we want to realize, but none of them are realized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pannisalum. You've taken a lot of big explanation and detailed about the Security Council membership and other things of the issues going on from Narasimha Rao period of till. But because of these five big power, not allowing to others, not entering, that is allowed, is still going on years together. India, Germany, Japan, South Africa, Brazil, many other countries trying, not even care about that. Any one of the countries stopping that membership. That is the right time to 75th year to take more initiative from the soft power, through people's power, to take up this issue in a great level. Now I am inviting Mr. Dr. V. Jabamalai, former principal advisor to UNIDO. Mr. Anu, Ms. Anu, excuse me.
Dr. V. Jabamalai, former Principal Director of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Sir was an Indian-born economist. He had completed his PhD from the University of Madras, worked as a senior economist in the United Nations Industrial Development Organization between 1987 to 2009. Between 2006 to 2009, Sir was a principal advisor, Director General of the UNIDO in Vienna, Austria. Sir has authored and co-authored more than 100 articles on industrial growth and trade liberalization. I'm very pleased and honored to have you with us here today, sir.
Sir, you can start yours.
Thank you for inviting me. I would like to make use of this great opportunity to talk about the role of United Nations in making peace and keeping peace in conflict-affected countries based on my own experience and experiments. At one point in my UN career, I was posted as a UNIDO representative in Sudan, At that time, South Sudan and North Sudan were fighting. The war was still on. And when I landed there, within a week, I realized that I was not relevant there, because all the interventions made by all the UN agencies were humanitarian centric because of the specific country specific context. 4 million people stranded as internally displaced persons, and 2 million people died, were killed. Then I wrote to headquarters and the counterpart, Ministry of Trade and Industry, saying that I feel enormously incompetent to make interventions befitting our mandate. UNIDO's mandate is to foster technologically advanced and ecologically sound means of protection, with a programmatic accent on economic efficiency, ecological compliance, and social inclusion. Then I said, please leave me in peace for 6 months. I will make my own survey and come out with a program. And we went, I led the team, the UNIDO team, to remote villages, and particularly to the pockets of durable peace. Though the war was on, in some regions, people signed peace agreement, and there was not even a single violation of ceasefire agreement for 3 consecutive years. And these people were asking for peace dividend in terms of sustainable sources of livelihood. So we went there, our UNIDO team went there and conducted a survey. We just asked simple questions to the internally displaced persons who returned to the areas of origin and areas of choice. They all said the following priorities. We want to own a piece of land, priority number 1. Number 2, we want the international community's assistance for cultivating land, increasing productivity, agricultural productivity, reducing post-harvest losses, getting into some type of semi-processing activities, and further processing into final products. We captured a niche. We came out with a document and we gave the title Humanitarian Plus, because if you don't use the word humanitarian, you're out of context. So we just made simple interventions and fabricated improved versions of the traditional agricultural tools, introduced some devices to reduce post-harvest losses. To make the long story short, we eradicated, UNIDO eradicated extreme poverty in 147 villages of the Nuba Mountain region. And it was done with the Japanese contribution to UN Trust Fund for Human Security, because we redefined human security and insecurity. And the ambassador helped us. And then no one wanted to look at us. When the World Bank heard about the impact and compact of the program from the target beneficiaries, they sent a team to assess the interventions made by UNIDO. And they came out with a report. You all can Google that report, Community-Based Development Projects in Sudan, Lessons Learned. In that report, they say what UN, including UNIDO, does is the best model for post-conflict recovery and development in terms of sensitization, target beneficiaries, local empowerment, tangible impact, and sustainability. That report gave a big boost to our image, and immediately European Union released $12 million to replicate the same in other parts of the region. And then now UNIDO is rolling with nearly $37 million to replicate the same. Simple interventions made a breakthrough in the quality of the rural life. This, I'm sure Mr. Panneerselvam will be very happy to know that in implementing this project, the impact matched the title of the program, Humanitarian Plus. We did deliver that. Now, kindly permit me to say a few words about the United Nations staff members. Any job anywhere can be a vacation, occasion, and vocation, depending on the aptitude and attitude of the person. But as far as I know, most of the United Nations staff members are sincere, devoted, loyal, and they all take it as a vocation. In specialized agencies, they institute a prize called Director General's Award for Outstanding Performance. This is for those who do perform beyond the call of duty, beyond the call of their duty described in the job description. Now, when I had a very interesting story to tell you. I will finish it in 3 minutes. Now, when I landed in Sudan, I went to the office and I saw a young girl cleaning the office. I asked her, what's your name? She said, Angelina. What are you doing? I'm the cleaning lady here. How long you are cleaning? He said, 18 years. She spoke excellent English with very good accent. Her accent was much better than mine. And then I went to Hilton for lunch. And when I came back, there was a note written by her saying that, dear sir, there was a call from Mr. El Nawabi, the director of Arab Bureau, UNIDO Vienna. He requested me to convey the following message in Shakespearean and Milton English. Then I told myself, this girl with this much quality, capabilities, cannot serve as a cleaning lady in UNIDO for 18 years. I should do something. Immediately, I requested my secretary and project manager to train her on the computer. I asked her to attend the weekly meetings because I wanted her to be exposed to the UN terminologies and terms. And then I was awaiting an opportunity. There was a vacancy as a security guard in the office. So I asked her to apply. The UN chief from the UNDP called me and said, Mr. Arachi, they call me Arachi. Mr. Arachi, you cannot promote a cleaning lady as security guard because we are even changing the title of security. They will be called the security officers. I said, I know what I talk about. I pay from my budget. Please interview her and tell me how does she perform. Next day, he called me and said, you are right, Angelina tops the list. She selected, we would like to have her in UNDP. I said, no, I will have her as a security guard. In UNIDO, within 6 months, I promoted her as security guard and a receptionist, front desk receptionist. You may not believe, now she is no more. At one point, she joined the secretariat of Mr. Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, and she was running that secretariat. At an international conference on women empowerment, she mentioned UNIDO 18 times, and my name also several times, saying that we discovered that. UNIDO staff members are very much at it. We do believe in eradicating income poverty, and we are also convinced, UNIDO staff members, UN staff members are totally convinced that in order to eradicate income poverty, we have to eradicate health poverty, energy poverty, education poverty, because of a very strong conviction of United Nations that lifting people out of poverty, different forms of poverty, is not an act of charity, it is indeed an act of human justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Javamalai. You got a lot of your experience in the UNIDO and other places. I am very happy to invite Ambassador Mr. T.P. Srinivasan. He wants to go urgently to participate in another conference. Actually, we want to invite him the last speaker because he's a top speaker, because in diplomatic world is one of the finest officer. So, but he wants to attend another meeting. So that's why he sent a message. I'm inviting Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan to give speech. Before that, Anu, please introduce Mr. T.P. Srinivasan.
Yes, sir. Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, IFS officer, retired, is an Indian diplomat from Travancore, state of Kerala. After completing his studies at the University College, part of University of Kerala in Thiruvananthapuram, he joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1967. He was also the Secretary of Legation, 3rd class in Tokyo, and Legation Secretary, 1st class in Bhutan. Between 2000 to 2004, Sir was an Indian ambassador at Vienna, Austria, and Slovenia. Was also a permanent member and permanent representative of India in the United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, he is the head of the Council of Higher Education of the state of Kerala, Executive Vice President and a rank of Vice Chancellor. We're very honored to have you today, sir.
Thank you. Sir, you can start your speech. You can unmute your mic. Dr. Srinivasan.
Thank you very much.
Yes, okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. We hear you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sampath. What a great opportunity that you have given me to speak at this group. Very distinguished people, including my friend Javamalai. We served together in Vienna. I have had a very deep involvement in the United Nations. 20 years out of these 75 years, I was in different missions of India to the UN. All the 4 headquarters. So I have a perspective about the United Nations at the time of the 75th year. It is most unfortunate that the 75th year of United Nations fell in 2020, because 2020 is going to be known in history as the annus horribilis, the horrible year. We would like to erase it from history. Unfortunately, it is at the same time that we are celebrating the United Nations 75th anniversary. And that's a great disadvantage because United Nations faced its ultimate challenge in March this year when the pandemic hit us. Most unfortunately, it happened to be the month in which the president of the Security Council was China. As a result of which, the United Nations failed to take any global action to meet this threat of the pandemic. And that has highlighted the many deficiencies of the UN and the many weaknesses and failures. It has, in fact, taken away from the UN the glamour that it had assumed in various parts of the world and the problems it has solved. Why did this happen? The fact that the United Nations has Security Council has 5 permanent members and they have a veto is a problem that has been raised many times. But it was demonstrated in its most unfortunate style at this time because the Security Council was not even permitted to hold a meeting to consider the pandemic. And this has absolutely taken away whatever UN has done in the past. As far as India is concerned, we have looked at the United Nations not to seek anything from them, but to give our experience and also to deal with problems in a multinational, multidisciplinary way. And this started suffering. The multilateralism started suffering with the advent of President Trump. And President Trump has, in fact, walked away from the architecture of the United Nations, which was set up by the United States itself. So he has brought this theory that all of us are independent, sovereign nations, must act on their own. Each country must act for itself. That had created the kind of decline that we have seen in the United Nations. Members of the UN look at the United Nations differently. The 5 permanent members use the United Nations as an instrument of their policy. The lower countries, or the less developed countries, look at the United Nations to get whatever they can in terms of assistance, in terms of projects, etc. The smallest of the countries with 5,000 population or 10,000 population, they look at the United Nations as a way of identifying their sovereignty. But India has not seen it from any of these perspectives. All that we did in the UN right from the beginning were meant for the globe as a whole. Whether it was Pandit Nehru in 1948 or Mr. Narendra Modi this year, they pointed out the fact that India is struggling for its own place in the world. At the same time, all our ambitions and all our dreams are also the dreams of the world. This has been our approach to the United Nations. So I have seen a lot of accomplishments, I have seen failures, but one thing has remained certain, that India's commitment to the United Nations has remained all these years. India is one of the largest peacekeeping force contributing country. India has contributed the best of the UN resolutions, whatever the seminal resolutions by the United Nations, whether it is Security Council or General Assembly, India has been behind it. So India's contribution is very significant. Of course, Mr. Paneerselvam talked about the membership of the Security Council, permanent membership of Security Council. But as he himself hinted, this is not going to happen ever. Because the United Nations, for it to change the permanent members or add permanent members, you need a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly and 5 permanent members of the Security Council. We are blaming the Security Council permanent members for not supporting us, or some of them are not supporting us. But the real problem is not that. You need 2/3 majority of the General Assembly to move this resolution. And we unfortunately do not have it. Because the vast majority of the United Nations would not like another country to have veto. It is not India specific. They have nothing against India. But the general principle adopted by about, shall we say, about 70% or 80% of the members of the General Assembly is that, if possible, we should throw the permanent members out and veto out rather than add more new permanent members to that. So we should not bank on that. So 2 points that the Prime Minister raised on the occasion of the 75th anniversary belong to these 2 issues that I just mentioned. He asked this question as to where was the United Nations when in the last 7 to 8 months we were struggling with this pandemic. This is how he asked. This has an importance because in the past, when there were pandemics of this kind, in fact, less serious than this, like Ebola, HIV, AIDS, SARS, etc., the United Nations Security Council took on these issues without leaving it to the WHO, because these are issues not of health alone. This particular pandemic is existential. We do not even know what the demography of the world would be after this pandemic is over. So it is a matter of international peace and security. And the Security Council failed to handle it in that manner, unlike in the previous cases, simply because China is in the dock of either having created the pandemic or at least not letting the world know about it. And therefore, using their opportunity as a member of the Security Council, as the president of the Security Council for March 2020, they did a great disservice to the United Nations. Talking about reform, reform is very cyclical. It keeps on happening. It is not the same United Nations today as it was in 1945. It was set up in order to save the succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It has not succeeded. Yes, as it was mentioned, there was no Third World War and that could be attributed to the UN. But 800 wars were fought in these 75 years, which United Nations could not prevent. But the fact that there was a forum for all these countries to discuss these differences, through preventive diplomacy, through peacekeeping, through peace building, through peace reconstruction, the United Nations has saved several countries from disasters. And one of the greatest achievements of the UN, when Ban Ki-moon was asked on the 70th anniversary, what is the greatest achievement of the UN? He did not say we stopped the Third World War. He did not say that we made peace. He said United Nations has inoculated the world's children against infectious diseases and prevented so many million lives, much more than what could have been saved from these wars. So the United Nations, in spite of what I'm trying to say, is that in spite of all these deficiencies and difficulties and lack of progress and lack of reform and not reflecting the world as it is today, it has made a tremendous contribution, particularly in terms of economic development, social development, setting standards for human rights, etc., etc. But today, this year, people are looking for an alternative to the UN because it has failed and it has been a disgrace. So the discussion that is taking place in the UN today, unfortunately, not with everybody present there, they're also doing exactly what we are doing. And that also is a sad reflection of what the world is happening today. People are now looking for an alternative because we need a body, a decision-making body, which does not have the problem of the veto. And people are looking at G20, for example, as a decision-making body which would work outside the UN. But whatever this may happen, but I do not believe that there will be a complete collapse of the UN, because unlike the League of Nations, the UN has a utility much beyond the political or military utility. Because the specialized agencies, Mr. Jabamale talked about what he did in Sudan, and these are the kind of things which matter to the developing world, not these huge issues, etc. And therefore the UN will continue. What reforms will be able to make in it, it is going to be limited. It will be more or less the same even after this is over. But the world after COVID has to change because of the tremendous change it has brought about. The economic collapse, the racial conflicts. So a huge number of issues are going to face the United Nations. And therefore it has to acquire the kind of capability and capacity. And let us be realistic. We are not going to become a permanent member of the United Nations. But there are so many other ways. Why don't we strengthen the General Assembly? You generally shift the decision making from the Security Council to the General Assembly. That is possible if the majority of the member states want to do that. There is already a provision for what is called uniting for peace, which is if a particular resolution is vetoed by the Security Council, that resolution can be taken to the United Nations General Assembly under the provision of uniting for peace and pass it. But the difference is that while the Security Council decision is obligatory, mandatory to the members, the General Assembly decision is not. So here lies the issue. If we can find some way in which we are able to strengthen the General Assembly's ability to deal with issues, maybe may not be the same issues as the Security Council deals with, like peace and war, but on other issues, if the General Assembly can be strengthened and given the powers to deal with them decisively, and the members of the United Nations undertake to implement those resolutions rather than merely accept them as recommendations. So this is the kind of path we have to take, because we are not going to expand the Security Council under the provisions of the Charter, nor are we going to break up the United Nations and create a new one. But there is enough possibility within the UN Charter, though it's a small document, sounds very strong and unchangeable. Within that, we have been able to accept very many new ideas and issues. It has been a very resilient document. So that is where we have to look at. And that is the greatest hope that UN has. UN has succeeded in many issues. It has failed in many issues. On the whole, its balance is right. But unfortunately, this pandemic has given the UN a very bad name and the feeling that it is unable to cope to save mankind from extinction. And that is what we have to deal with. So in future, if such issues come, it should be possible for the United Nations to act without the cooperation of one or two countries which have veto power. And that is really where the test of the United Nations is going to be. And I hope in future, we will be able to work on that rather than keep talking about permanent membership of the Security Council. If it comes, well, it comes. But I do not believe that will ever happen that India will become a permanent member of the Security Council with veto. So the alternatives have to be found, and we have to work in terms of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You've given a very detailed, practical, and realistic situation of United Nations, because you served a long time in the United Nations and you know inner story and outer story and India's story and the international story. You've done a wonderful explanation about that. That is the feeling. That is, even though we are all trying for not only India, South Africa, Brazil, China, not China, Japan, Germany, many countries trying, nothing moving. You are practically right. I'm requesting you to be there for another few minutes, because I want Mr. His Excellency Shri Tirumurthy, your colleague, and is very much mentioning about you, and at least you can be there for at least 10 minutes to listen his speech, and then you can go to next webinar. Is it okay, Mr. Srinivasan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I am inviting.
I'll be here for a while. Yes, I have another webinar, but.
Yes, just 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Okay.
Ms. Anu, can you introduce
Yes,
Tirumurthy, His Excellency?
Yes, sir. His Excellency T.S. Tirumurthy, born in 1962, is an Indian diplomat and belongs to Indian Foreign Services. Sir is currently appointed as a permanent representative of India in the United Nations. Sir was born in Chennai. He completed his bachelor's in commerce and degree in law. Sir has also served as a diplomat in Cairo, Geneva, Gaza, Washington, D.C., and Jakarta. Mr. Tirumurthy was the first representative of India in the state of Palestine. Sir, I'm deeply honored and privileged to give this introductory note about you.
Dr.VRS.Sampath, President of the Madras Development Society, distinguished speakers and participants, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank the Madras Development Society, Chennai, and Sattkadir, Tamil Law Journal, for coming together to organize this webinar conference on UN at 75 and beyond. I would like to commend Dr. V.R.S.Sampath, President of the Madras Development Society, and the moving spirit behind this event for this very timely webinar. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome the other distinguished speakers in this conference, particularly my senior in the Foreign Service, Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan, who has been a major player in India's contribution to the United Nations and in the shaping of India's policy towards the United Nations. The 75th anniversary of the United Nations is indeed a momentous occasion and holds a special place for India. I would like to remind the participants that even before we gained independence, India was among the founding signatories of the UN Charter at the historic San Francisco Conference. It was Sir Arcot Ramaswamy Mudaliar and Sir V.T. Krishnamachari who signed this charter in June 1945 on behalf of India. Sri Ramaswamy Mudaliar also had the very unique distinction of serving as the first president of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. It would not be an exaggeration if I say that India had played a pivotal role in shaping the agenda of the United Nations over the decades, including by taking the lead on a variety of issues like decolonization, apartheid, human rights, disarmament, environment, terrorism, development, and others. We have had many firsts to our credit, and our contribution has been widely appreciated and respected. This year, however, we have had COVID, which has not only tragically taken away lives of people around the world, but also threatened to set back the progress the United Nations has made over the years. For example, the pandemic threatens to set back the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which we have all committed ourselves to achieve by 2030. Consequently, even as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, we have also been given a rude reality test by the pandemic, which makes it imperative that we use this occasion to introspect on where and which direction the United Nations is heading and see where we can enhance and prioritize our focus. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that the pandemic has given us an opportunity to build back better in the post-COVID world. But what indeed do we do to build back better? At the very least, we need to recapture the spirit of constructive cooperation to come up with innovative and inclusive solutions to foster peace and security and to foster development. However, this constructive cooperation cannot come in a vacuum. It can only come about when there is greater accommodation of diverse interests and when there is an attempt to be more inclusive. This will automatically mean that the UN has to reflect the growing reality of our time, which is that the United Nations bodies, particularly the Security Council, should be more representative of the current reality to be more meaningful. This is precisely what Prime Minister Modi underlined in the UN General Assembly last month, when he made a call that reform in the responses, in the processes, in the character at the United Nations is the need of the hour, and that India can no longer be kept out of the decision-making structures of the United Nations. The issue is not as much multilateralism versus unilateralism, but status quo versus reform. Consequently, when we build back better, the reform of the Security Council should be central in order that we have a United Nations which is more inclusive, more responsive to diverse interests, and therefore more capable of fostering the spirit of constructive cooperation. We still have a long way to traverse down this road. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the preeminent purposes of the UN Charter is to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. The world's gravest danger today is the unabated spread of terrorism. When sponsored and supported by states, terrorism becomes another means of waging war. Even COVID times has not dimmed the enthusiasm of some countries to support terrorism. In fact, they have taken advantage of the pandemic to indulge in terrorism, including cross-border terrorism, underestimating the resolve of countries like India to tackle this menace. The international community, particularly the United Nations, should take a firm stand against terrorism since it threatens the very basis of democratic and peaceful societies like ours. Apart from being in the forefront of tackling terrorism, India has always been a major factor to promote and maintain peace and security. As our External Affairs Minister mentioned recently, India remains committed to upholding the rules-based international order underpinned by the rule of law, transparency, freedom of navigation in the international seas, respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, and peaceful resolution of disputes. We will seek to promote maritime security given our strong interest in Indo-Pacific and in Africa. The UN peacekeeping operations have played an important role in maintaining peace and security by protecting civilians and preventing human rights violations arising from conflict. India has a proud legacy of shouldering this responsibility by not only providing the largest number of peacekeeping troops, but also having lost more peacekeepers than any other country. We must work towards greater direction, safety, and professionalism in UN peacekeeping mandates. And when we build back better in the post-COVID period, we need to put the human being back at the center of our focus in the United Nations. The initiatives taken by India domestically in recent times have put this human being at the center of our development. We have focused on people-centric solutions. The pandemic has reminded us that we need to look at people-centric socio-economic issues, like, for example, health infrastructure, to build strong foundations for a democratic and pluralistic society. The United Nations and its member states have to adopt a multi-dimensional and a whole-of-society approach to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 for the welfare of all, especially those most vulnerable to poverty. We need to make this decade a decade of action to achieve the SDGs and not let the pandemic decide our fate. Ladies and gentlemen, India has recently been elected to the UN Security Council for the term 2021-22 with overwhelming majority, attesting to the important initiatives taken by India to reach out to all countries around the world in a spirit of friendship, cooperation, and development partnership. The priorities we have set for ourselves during our stint in the Security Council reflect our desire to make this a better world. Our priorities include fighting terrorism, including cross-border terrorism, strengthening peacekeeping, taking up the agenda of reformed multilateralism, especially in the context of the reform of the Security Council, using technology, especially digital technology, to bring about change in the lives of people, greater involvement of women and youth, and strengthening peace building through development, human rights, democracy, and institution building. Given our strong credentials in forging developmental partnership with fellow developing countries, we have also partnered with the United Nations to contribute to South-South cooperation. 3 years ago, India established the US $150 million India-UN Partnership Fund at the United Nations to support projects in developing countries and contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals, and in the recent past, to fight the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought great misery to hundreds of thousands of lives. But it also provides the UN with an opportunity to build back better. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. India has always been a force for peace, progress, and prosperity. And I'm confident that, as Swami Vivekananda once said, India's aspirations will go on increasing till it engulfs the whole of humanity. I once again thank Dr. VRS.Sampath for inviting me and getting all of us together. I wish this virtual conference all success. Thank you.
Thank you, because our permanent representative of India to United Nations, you are all listening. Hello? Okay. All, because he actually wants to participate and give a speech. So finally, some important time is unable to participate. That's why he sent a video message. That's why we are playing that. Thanks for his wonderful speech about the reality of India and the United Nations, the present situation. And I am requesting Mr. Virendra Sharma, one of the popular member of parliament from London. I request Anu. Anu?
Yes, sir.
Can you present this profile to the participants? Okay.
Mr. Virendra Sharma is a Member of Parliament, London, United Kingdom. He is a first-generation Indian at the House of Commons, UK Parliament, from 2007 to present. Sir was first elected British Member of Parliament. Born in Mandali, Punjab, India, Sir was initially a member of the International Development Select Committee and was re-elected therein in 2015 and then again in 2017. Sir has also chaired the Indo-British All-Party Parliamentary Group and has led many delegations for health, poverty and sustainable development. Sir is currently leading a UK campaign for commemoration of the Amritsar massacre. Sir has also led campaigns on dowry, caste system, women and child trafficking, and sexual exploitation. So we are very honored to have you here with us today.
Sir, Mr. Virendra Sharma. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sampath, and it's a pleasure to join you all from London. I'm Virendra Sharma, Member of Parliament for Ealing Southall. As such, I'm still familiar with the political situation in India. Indeed, many of my constituents prefer to discuss it to the goings on in Westminster. I grew up in Punjab, in village Mandali. My late father was a local Congress party leader, and I was lucky enough to meet many of the great figures of independence as a child. The creation of India as again a nation of singular political importance was one of the great undertakings of the 20th century. We here today, standing in the 21st century, are part of the Indian century. The next 100 years will be a period where Indian power and influence have the ability to shape the world. A nation united in defense of ideas of secularism, toleration, progressiveness, and democracy will define these years. And India cannot look inwards today. It cannot afford to end. It should not be want to. The United Nations, founded 2 years before modern India, is just one forum in which an outward-looking, progressive, and effectual country will engage. Dr. Sampath, I don't think it would cause much dispute around the world to say that India, more than any other nation in the world, deserves a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. It would be a meaningful step away from an imperial West to recognize the need to share that table on an equal footing with India. It would recognize India's status as a world power, nuclear weapons state, important economy, and country of nearly 1.4 billion people. Such power and position on the world stage is not without responsibilities. It is not just a player, but also a weight. When we turn to America, to China, to Russia, we see countries gripped by populism, by a return to the worst days of autocrats and rulers, unconstrained by bad press and democracy. India is the democracy, the largest in the world, a feat that comes with its own challenges. This is to be celebrated, cherished, and protected. And every Indian patriot should stand proudly for the democracy that it defines the country as a beacon of freedom. The democracy is also celebrated in freedom of the press and toleration. Toleration of religion, toleration of sexuality, toleration of diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Ladies and gentlemen, the Indian century will not be defined by conservatism, but by diversity and how different experiences and points of views makes us stronger, not weaker. For hundreds of years, Britain and India have been partners in one form or another. Frankly, for India, that was not a healthy relationship for a long time. But today, I like to think we stand together as allies and friends, people with a lot of shared history, much shared language, and a shared legal heritage and political basis. I'm delighted to chair the Indo-British All-Party Parliamentary Group in our parliament, to be a custodian of that relationship. As a British Indian, born in India, but made in Britain, I'm part of Prime Minister Modi's living bridge, and I could not be prouder of my dual heritage. Together, the countries make up the best of the world. Traditions and history, with skills and knowledge, technical know-how, and a second-to-none service sector. The power that exists in closure and deeper ties between both countries is boundless. I want to see that recognized. I want to see both countries make the most of that connection and invest in bringing us together. There are barriers and areas of less alignment, but I don't think these need prevent better working together. Britain needs to remember they are no longer an imperial power, but an equal, and India needs to commit to following the international rules-based order, commit to ending corporate espionage, and ensure standards of treatment of workers and products made. This is not an opportunity for Britain to take advantage of India, but a chance for a truly equal partnership. But this is not just an economic question. And a century on from one of the most barbaric acts of empire, the wounds still are cut deep. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919 was an act notable for its cold, calculated murder. Still today, it clouds the relationship between India and Britain. And I have long campaigned for an official apology from the British government. I know this alone does not undo the stain of empire and colonialism, but it says we recognize what was wrong. More important than that, though is the monument and record of imperialism and a note in Britain's collective memory. And so I have been proud to, for many years, lead the charge for a monument to empire and colonialism. A monument in London, the heart of imperial power, to the cruelty and savagery of empire. It should be an unflinching look at the pains and humiliation inflicted on millions around the globe, and it should educate millions of British school children every year about the role the British Empire played in subjugating a quarter of the world. The 21st century is an opportunity for India to embrace a new and wider role in the world, an opportunity for Britain to recognize its modern place and come to terms with the loss of empire. It is an opportunity for the world to embrace toleration and diversity, democracy and difference, and turn its back on rigid dogma, popularism and conservatism. With vision and commitment, we can see years dominated by a powerhouse relationship between modern India and modern Britain. For the progressives around the world, we have an opportunity today to found a progressive century, a century founded on updated relationships and modern ideas. The Indian century. Dr. Sampath, it's a pleasure to join you today, remembering all these days when I was in Chennai and you were in London. And I look forward to close working relationship so that we can bring 21st century as a true century for India. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to joining you. Thank you.
Thank you. You've given a wonderful speech about India-UK relationship, friendship, and history, as well as United Nations contribution, many other things. It is a great joy for us to listen from you, because you are sitting as a member of Parliament in London, and I visited many times as your guest and participated in the Parliament building, many conferences and seminars, and also you participated in our conference in Chennai. It is a great relationship for us. We are working together, and we work together, do many things. Thanks, sir. And I'm inviting the great speaker and a very important speaker from South Africa, Madam Ila Gandhi, former member of Parliament, and also the granddaughter of the great Mahatma Gandhi. Anu,
Yes,
can you?
sir.
Yes.
Madam Ila Gandhi is a granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. She is a South African peace activist. Madam was a member of Parliament, South Africa, between 1994 to 2000, aligned with the African National Congress. Madam, in the Parliamentary Committee, had handled many assignments, which included welfare and public enterprises. Madam, in her lifetime, has been awarded with a number of awards, few of it being the Community of Christ International Peace Award in 2002. In 2007, Madam was awarded by the Government of India with the Padma Bhushan Award, and in 2014, Madam was honored by the President of India then with the Parvasi Bharatiya Saman Award. Madam, we are very honored to have you here today with us.
Madam.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this, discussion. I think it is a very, very important discussion. Just to repeat some of the things that have already been said, the United Nations was formed in the hope that countries and nations will employ negotiated settlements rather than go to war and use violent methods to settle disputes. The horrific effects of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki shocked the world into action. It was established as a common global organization for all peoples of the world, and with the aim, and I'm just going to quote a few, there have been many quoted already, but from my perspective, there are 5 very important aims. Number 1 is to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. 2, to establish conditions for justice in the world. 3, to create respect for international law. 4, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights. And number 5, to promote economic and social advancement of all peoples of the world. On the 75th anniversary, I think it is a good time to see how far these global aims have been achieved. Since the first use of the nuclear weapon in war 75 years ago, 19 countries or more have nuclear capability today. At that time, there were only 2 countries that had nuclear weapons. Today, there are 19 countries and maybe more who possess nuclear capability. The weapons today have 1,000 times greater potential power than the ones that were used 75 years ago. What does this say of the first aim of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war? It is said by some authorities that their reasoning was based on a belief that, and I quote, security depends on accumulating more power than your enemies, while doing everything you can to limit their accumulation of such power. Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme pointed out the fallacy of such thinking, and he chaired a major United Nations commission in 1981 that presented an alternate. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev studied the Palme Commission report, and in 1986, at a meeting with US President Ronald Reagan, a discussion began on a process of abolishing all nuclear weapons in the world. But 34 years since then, until today, the threat of these nuclear arsenals are still there. Nobody has dismantled them except South Africa and Kazakhstan. The idea that our safety lies in arming ourselves with even more superior weapons than others is no longer acceptable. In a world armed with nuclear weapons, it's a formula that holds potential for the deaths of billions of human beings and the destruction of human and natural worlds in the future. The idea of common security may seem vacuous against the cold brutality of nuclear weapons and their military and political champions. But when West Germany embodied the idea in policy in its relationship with the Soviet Union in the early 1980s, and when Mikhail Gorbachev then carried it to Reichsville, it contributed directly to the end of the Cold War, to the partial nuclear disarmament of the 2 superpowers, and to the subsequent reuniting of East and West Germany into a single nation again. Not a shot was fired. This was done peacefully through negotiations. The work of freeing the world from the threat of nuclear war, nuclear winter, and world-scale destruction must fall now to the young people, the youth of today, young citizens who have taken up the cause of limiting global warming need to realize that nuclear war is an equal and more immediate threat to human and natural life. The present COVID-19 pandemic clearly indicates that the world is interconnected and common security is the answer to major issues facing the world today, such as global warming. Many leaders have spoken out about finding a new normal as life will never return to the old normal. We have to find a new way of thinking. We therefore need to look at how can humanity secure itself against the ill effects of climate change from threats of violence and natural disasters. Gandhian ideas cover every one of the aims of human rights, economic and social justice, international law, establishing conditions for a just society in every country, and the imperative of building a culture of nonviolence. Just consider if all that money that governments are spending on building nuclear capability and on maintaining nuclear capability, if that is diverted to building SDGs in every country will be prosperous. Every country will have the basic necessities of life. All the people in the world will be happier, have a better living conditions. Why would war be necessary if that happens? Consider that. For Gandhiji, non-violence was not just about the absence of violence, but the creation of a climate of love and caring, which spreads to the universe and all animate and inanimate objects. A caring person does not hoard or be self-centered or violent or hurtful or reckless and destructive. A caring person shows compassion, can understand the pain of others, and will do something to help change the situation. A caring person will try to ensure food security and shelter for all people, quality education and health care for all people, access to water and sanitation, and conditions of good health through the control of carbon emission. So while UN makes rules and creates organs to help countries and its people, this can only be successful if the people themselves are also prepared to make an effort. UN and India's envoys within the UN were instrumental in much of the help that we received from the international community to force apartheid South African government to come to the table to negotiate a peaceful settlement. Starting from the time Dr. Vijayalakshmi Pandit was at the UN, that's before India even got its independence. India proposed the isolation of South Africa because of its apartheid policies. We are indeed very grateful to all those efforts made to isolate apartheid South Africa, impose sanctions, and speak out against the apartheid oppression through the UN and other international fora. particularly championed by India. Finally, I urge civic society, all of us who are not within the government, not within the UN, throughout the world, as people of the world, to support the efforts that are being made right now by India and South Africa to urge WTO to slacken both price control and TRIPS agreement on COVID-19 treatment efforts so that all the people of the world will have access to quality drugs that may be produced in the future. So I urge every one of us to support this effort so that companies that want to patent these drugs and accumulate money from the suffering of the people will be stopped from doing this. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. You've given a wonderful and detailed speech about the India's contribution for to release from apathy rule from South Africa. South Africa and India have a very good friendship and relationship. More than 1 million Indians are living, especially South Indian Tamils are living more than 1 million. So I visited more than 10 times to South Africa. I had an opportunity to meet you also in person when the government of India and the government of South Africa celebrated Gandhi's 125th year, and that is St. Petersburg railway station incident. The government of India organized a special function. They invited me as a special guest. I had an opportunity to visit there, and also I met you on a different occasion. Your participation was very much useful for us to know a lot of information. Thank you. And now I'm inviting the chair, Dr. Anandakrishnan, to say a few words before go to vote of thanks. Sir, you can unmute panning, sir. Please unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Sampath,
Yes.
it has been an extremely informative, authoritative, valuable commentary on the achievements as well as the limitations of the United Nations, and also very thoughtful suggestions as how to remove the limitations of the United Nations to serve the better rest of the society. I really enjoyed every bit of the discussion, particularly very eminent people who have taken a lot of time to think through the issues of the United Nations, and I hope we will have another opportunity to participate on similar discussion with eminent persons that are around the world. Thank you, Dr. Sampath.
Thank you, sir. You got a wonderful concluding remarks. After vote of thanks also, there is a small video presentation for the late Mr. C. Subramaniam. Those who are interested to continue and see. Now I'm inviting Mr. Professor T.K.S. Vellalan to present his vote of thanks.
Very good evening. Before concluding or before presenting my vote of thanks, I would like to present some of the points of United Nations, which was started as a people of United Nations. In the charter, it says it is a people of United Nations with certain important objectives like, say, for example, security, human rights, international law, and that of the social progress and better standard of life. But the question here is the major question of this organization, and through all these 75 years of time, has achieved these objectives or not. It is a major question, and we need to look into that. The United Nations has been one of the controversial institutions, admired by many as well as that reviled by others. This organization has received many Nobel Prizes for peace and other awards for saving lives and easing sufferings, but also been favorite target of politicians who suspects or they claim they do in order favor with certain group of voters, and thus UN trying to become a global government. I would like to quote from an ambassador to United Nations from United States of America, Mr. Henry Cabot Lodge in 1954. This organization is created to prevent you from going to hell, and it is not created to take you to heaven. So such was the initial period. And if you look into this, all 75 years of time of this United Nations progress, we can split into two parts, and before 1980s and after 1980s. And before 1980s, we see that the institution was more controversial with the ideas of capitalist countries as well as that of communist countries. After 1980s, it was more with that of the market-oriented superpowers and their dominance and their political issues, which had led to a major economic and political crisis. So when you look into all these things of these 75 years of time, this institution, whether it has achieved or not, it is a question. Recently, I read the University of United Nations came out with a chart called the United Nations System in 21st Century. And the UN they come out with two ideas. They said the UN as a global manager and another one is global council. As a heuristic guide, the project examines what could be or should be the United Nations in next century. One of the greatest challenges facing United Nations is to address the critical task of reinventing the organization to make it credible force in 21st century. The pressing issues of today and for the future, chief among them are revival of nationalism, ethnic cleansing, genocide, unprecedented humanitarian crisis, gross violation of human rights, the degradation of environment, poverty, social inequalities, the spread of HIV and AIDS, drug trafficking, international terrorism, population growth, increasing the levels of employment and economic migration from south to north, demand a strong and effective United Nations adapted to meet its ever-widening agenda. It is therefore necessary to look ahead for indications of significant changes in the political, social, and economic environments to assess as well as in advance as possible what action is needed if the UN is to deal successfully either with resultant crisis or resultant opportunities. What new challenges are likely to emerge in the years ahead? What problems are likely to persist? What reforms can and should be undertaken to enable the UN to effectively respond to current and future challenges? These are just a few of the many complex questions that form the rich research agenda of the United Nations system in 21st century. And this was done by the United Nations University for the 21st century UN. And with these words, what we need to do in future of 21st century, we need to support United Nations and we need to group again in the 100-year also in order to encourage the system organization. And with these words, I come into the last, my area of thanksgiving to these participants. I would like to mention Mr. Dr. Anandakrishnan. When we were celebrating the 50th year, I was there introducing him. I was welcoming him at Chola, and also I participated when he was a vice chancellor in a Pattimandram with Tambaram Rajagopalan, and I met him there in the Anna University. So I thank Ms. Dr. Anandakrishnan for his valuable insights into that of the United Nations and its need and its role of United Nations, etc. I also thank His Excellency T.S. Tirumurthy, who had given a clear and a video lecture on about the India's role and the importance the relevance of peacekeeping membership, etc. And Mr. T.P. Srinivasan is also given, who had 20 years of experience in UN, and he has given a wide knowledge and issues about the peacekeeping, and he categorically mentioned about India cannot possible to become a member in the Security Council. And I would like to thank Ms. Ella Gandhi, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi ji, and she was more concerned with that of the United Nations, and more importantly with that of the arms and ammunition, without free arms and ammunition. And like what Gandhi has said, the non-violence attitude, the same should be continued with the United Nations on people. The people should live peacefully and happily, and their standard of living must rise. And so we, on behalf of the Madras Development Society, thank Mrs. Ella Gandhi for her valuable contribution. I also thank the Member of Parliament from London, Mr. Virendra Sharma, for his valuable speech on the Indo-UK relationship, Britain relationship, and also about the United Nations. And I must fail my duty if I don't thank Mr. Jebamalai, who had a personal experience in Sudan, and how he took care of the sweeper girl, and how he promoted the individual contribution, as well as what flaw found in the Sudan UN system. So I thank him, and also Mr. Pannir Selvam, the editor of Hindu, who had given what the nature of gap between the policy and the fulfilling the policies and United Nations. And also, not least one, Mr. Ahmed Al Mukaini from Oman, a public policy analyst. I must thank him for having given a wonderful speech on United Nations and India. And with these words, I thank everyone who had participated in this UN 75th year anniversary. And I must more thank Dr. Sampath, who was a pioneer and instrument in bringing this conference so successfully. And I'll fail my duty if I don't mention Anu Narendran, who had given us a sweet and soft voice, introduce all the speakers in an interesting way. And once again, I say, I thank everyone for their contribution. Thank you very much.
She's worried only to unable to introduce yourself because of she's unable to
No problem.
Anyway, now almost the main part of this conference over. If you like, for the participants, we are playing for the Mr. C. Subramaniam participated in the previous conference and given a wonderful speech. That is our idea to give.
Gallery, and then
we are unable to play that video properly. Anyway, we are closing this conference. Thank you, one and all. We had a wonderful experience about the speech from different personalities. We'll meet some other occasion to share the views. We all played this entire video conference in the Facebook also. We will upload in the YouTube, and also we'll bring this entire speech as a booklet to circulate in important agencies. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Dr. Sampath. Very well done. Good. It was a good evening today. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent program.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody want to say anything? You can say now. We
just want to thank you. Thank you for the great job you do.
Thank you, Mr. Sampath.
I want to say,
very happy.
Professor Gandhi is there.
Dr. Sampath.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for giving this wonderful opportunity.
Dr. Sampath, sir.
Thank you.
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
We must thank the Nobel Committee for having awarded UNO World Food
Yes.
Yeah. We have to congratulate.
Yes, we must express our happiness to Nobel Committee.
Yes.
Dr. Sampath, one point I want to say, you are talking about Mahatma Gandhi Peace Institute, which you wanted to have it in India as a global forum.
Who's
Time
speaking?
to do it. time to do it, I think.
Yes.
If you remember, we discussed a few years back.
Yes, thank you.
I think you should take lead with all these people you know. We should have an alternate for UN as well. UN has lost its importance as I see it.
Okay. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Now is the 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Conference will be over.
Thank you, Sampath ji, for your wonderful program.
Giving an
Program, ji.
opportunity. We are
Thank you.
also
Thanks a lot.
thankful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.